First of all, thank you for this, because for me it's a great opportunity to talk to you directly, because you've seen me around anyway. This has been like a home for the last, what, 8 years now? I've been coming back and forth. But I actually think this is a great opportunity for us to have a conversation about my intrusion. So the first thing is that, of course, Ellen and I met, what, 10, 11 years ago, when we were thinking about doing something in NYU Accra in Ghana. And then we started talking about this collection, and she had these concerns about some objects in this collection. And we thought, well, we'll talk about it, we'll think about it. And so what you see now is the response to that conversation way back. And it's in 3 places, as you know. So the works here was what stimulated the project, Resignifications. And then the 2 other spaces were supposed to give us other venues to express the different dimensions of the exhibition. So here you will see very subtle juxtapositions with the original collection. You would also see very subtle insertions in the existing collection. And then for people to see more, you can advise them to go to Bardini, where they will see a bigger sense of juxtaposition in a larger space. And then they go to Galleria Biagiotti, which is more overt and really is like the big political statement that looks at both the content and the style of artistic representation. So Biagiotti is that place that's just there in your face, and it provokes you, it intimidates you, because the images there are looking back at you. And so you kind of have this weird relationship where they're not just objects that are sitting as decoration, but they're actually making a statement about the way they are looked at. And most of the artists did it deliberately, and I chose them deliberately as well. So there are 3 venues, as I said, but let me just wind back to this space. So one of the greatest assets for me, my interpretation of this space, is the ability of this family to collect work from different generations, from different hybrids. Hi, come on in. So one of the greatest things for me, attributes to this place, Villa La Pietra, and it opened up a way of seeing collections for me, was the way the family gathered things from different times and different places and organized them not according to historical periods, but just by putting them in dialogue with each other. So from every work you see in the collection, you obviously see a conversation between a different time and a different place, with objects from another time and place. And you, as the person looking at it, you're caught between this conversation. So it's really like a big community of making meanings through the objects that you see and through the people who collected them, and also why they collected them. And so when people come to look at it, my hope is that they would see themselves as part of a dialogue that has already started between the objects that are put next to each other. Because you can historically, if you're an art historian, you will notice that some of the works don't belong together, but in the process of collecting and using them in the house, they put them almost opposite each other so that you can actually see a deliberate dialogue between historical periods and places, as well as ideas of art from one period to the other. So the spectator, the tall person who comes here, is really joining that kind of conversation. And that's important for us when we were conceptualizing the exhibition. So in this collection, in the spirit of putting things next to each other, we looked at what existed, and we saw an unusual amount of blackamoors. And it's unusual for many reasons, because most collections do not have this kind of number of works that NYU has. And the other part of it that's unusual is that majority of them show these African bodies in service oriented roles. So they're not really like the big people you see in the paintings and so on. They're serving something or somebody, either as militia in the military sense, or they're carrying candles, lamps, clocks, and so on. Or they're actually holding on to something that supports the building. And that's very curious, especially for an American institution. That representation is part of the foundation of America's inequality, right? Especially regarding people of African descent. So I can imagine the trauma of any director of this place with over 200 American kids encountering this for the first time. I can imagine the questions they want to ask and may not get a quick answer to. Is that what? They can do that? You know, because in America, it's borderline illegal, right? If it's not illegal, it's kind of not cool because of the history of creating stereotypes of people of African descent in the United States. But here, we felt that they're not actually in the same kind of history, but yet they are a continuity. So they're not like exactly the same, but they are related. And so we try to put it in their original historical context. And in that process, we realized that these works at a certain time was really something people wanted in their homes as part of internal decorations. And so the idea was by a new bourgeoisie, which was no longer an aristocrat and cannot really afford a lot of slaves like they did in plantations in the United States and elsewhere, right? They needed the trappings of what aristocrats had in their homes. And if they couldn't have it, they can create replicas of it. And that's why the blackamoors that are here reflect a specific genre where they're really serving, but it's the beauty of their presence and what it adds to the internal decoration of wherever they're at that actually makes sense. You can see the beauty not just from what their faces look like, but from what they're wearing, right? The tunic, the heraldry, and so on is usually very beautifully constructed. And we felt that was just fascinating. And so as a response to that, what did we do? We did a couple of things. We said, let's have a formal meeting. We've been talking about this informally. We had a formal meeting here, what, 6 years or more?
No, 3 years ago.
No, before that, with the lunch, yeah. With
No.
Bob Holmes and 6 years ago. So we had this conversation. I said, well, let's just do something now about it. And so with a member of the College of Arts and Sciences board, Robert Holmes, Ellen Toscano, and we started conspiring to do something about it. And that something about it was, how do we re-signify these works in their original historical context, but also in their broader historical context. You have to remember that when these things were constructed, there were fewer people of African descent in Europe, in Italy in particular. But what then happens at a period when there is a huge amount of people of African descent in Italy, also, and the kind of discomfort that their presence creates contradicts the comfort of these objects in homes, right? So it's cool, it's okay, it's decorative in our homes, but it's uncomfortable, etc., when you encounter people on the streets that are strange and similar, right? So that kind of tension was what we used to say, let's pick artists whose works reflect not just the objectification of African bodies, but actually African bodies as the subject of art. And some of them are contesting not only the subject matter, but they're also contesting the style of artistic expression. So you can see some of them are really saying, for instance, if you see the work by the Angolan artist called The Great Italian Nude, it's a retelling of the reclining nude, which is a classical painting. Or if you see the Ethiopian guy's work, which is called The Girl with the Bamboo Earring, it's a retelling of The Girl with the Pearl Earring, right? So it's using the style to make a statement that what happens if you flip it so that these people are actually using a style people are familiar with, but they're not just objects, but they're actually subjects of the work. So that's one of the things that you will see in this place is very subtle. We have about 28 works, which includes photographs, maybe one tapestry, a painting, some sculptural work, and videos. And so again, as I said, it was really subtle, right? And thanks to Stefano for actually helping guide and structure some of the insertions of these works. And so what I will ask is that as people come to see the work, they will see that some things look out of place, but then it's not a rational opinion because everything is out of place. Right, so but it's just a new thing that's out of place. And that new thing that's out of place is, of course, these people who are wondering, what are we doing in the middle of this collection? You know, and then you begin to look at it in terms of perspectives. We created a visual perspective, you know, where you get these angles between what you're seeing. So if you see one thing here, you have to look at another angle of a perspective of the work. So if you're here, you look up there, you'll see the work of another person there, or you look across the room. So we were playing with perspectives because it's about ways of seeing, right? And we put in new works to challenge the traditional ways of seeing, right? And so I'll talk about the specifics of what happens with each work, but I just wanted to give you this general thing, just so you have an idea that our hope is that by reinterpreting these works, we're creating a relationship between contemporary ways of seeing it and contemporary ways of producing knowledge with what we own in this space. Right? We're teaching our students too that on how to look at culture and cultural artifacts, right? So that it's not just about the old, but how can the modern read the past, right? And so we're giving new oxygen to the old things that you see in the room. So it's important that we don't see it as an erasure of what's old, but actually it's a way of reanimating what's old with the new. And this contemporary artist's work is in dialogue with all of this old art so that people can actually say, well, let's look at the past through the present. And let's ask the kind of question, what makes this so beautiful? What makes it as an archive of historical memory and stuff like that? So that's the kind of stuff that I hope that we can tell people. Okay, this is that time where you can ask me any question because I've talked a bit. Is there anything I said that's not clear?
So,
yeah.
Yeah. When you started to select the artists, so did you first choose the artist, or you asked a group of artists to present a work and then you chose?
That's a fantastic question. So, in the process of achieving this project, what we did was we first had our formal conversation, the three of us, with other interested parties. And then we came up with the idea to bring some artists here in residence to respond to the works. And then because of their responses, I started building the criteria for selecting artists elsewhere, those who weren't here. So we started looking at other people's works in relation to those people who came here to stay for a few days. But I had a vague idea what kind of works I like to put in conversation with each other. Now, that's the word conversation is important because what we did is it's a conversation amongst people from Africa, from Europe, from North and South America, and the Caribbean. So it's a kind of a global conversation because we're a global university, but it's really a kind of a global conversation where people who are invested in African bodies as the subject of art, whether they're Africans or Europeans, it's a conversation with their style and the content. And that's why we kind of selected artists whose works can be in conversation with each other. Now, the other part of it is we brought in very famous artists. We mixed them up in conversation with new artists, some of whom are not yet known. because we wanted to create generational conversations. We also wanted to create geographical conversations. So what does the African artist have to do with the person from Brazil, right? Or what does the Caribbean artist have to do with the European artist? So we kind of created this kind of intergenerational thing where very well-known artists and emerging artists were put side by side, and also people from the African diaspora were also put side by side in a dialogue, so that it's not just coming from one place. But also, the selection, we made sure that we included European artists who are also working in this area, just because they actually are looking at things in a global perspective. So we said this is the kind of community that their work belongs to, and that's why you see a lot. In fact, we have a lot of Italian artists, right, in the show, as well as other European artists, because of the kind of work they've been doing historically. So the criteria for selecting was to resignify old works, but to, in that process of resignifying them, to bring different generations of artists and people from different parts of the world in that conversation. Now, what makes this more important is our contemporary moment in history. So at the moment, even as we speak, there will be hundreds of people trying to get on a dangerous boat ride to Italy, to Portugal, or somewhere, or to Spain. And then you ask yourself, why? What's going on? Why can't they stay in Africa? Well, I can give you an answer to that because I do teach this stuff. But the other question, of course, is that when you look at the United States, almost every day somebody of African descent is being shot at by the law, right? The prisons are actually overrepresented, right? So the majority of the people in United States prisons are actually people, African Americans. So there are more people of African American descent in prison than there are in universities or even in the army. So something is going on. And then, of course, here we also are dealing with immigration and xenophobia, right? In the sense that for some of these people, they have been part of the history of Europe for hundreds of years. That's why we have them in the image of the blackamoors. But something just changed because circumstances, historical circumstances, it's like tomorrow if people from Greece start coming to Italy, or as you did get people from Eastern Europe coming to the rest of Western Europe, the kind of xenophobia that breeds is counterproductive to culture. And so for people who make cultural artifacts, we're saying, why don't you create a dialogue that's of a broader humanism, right? So today, as we celebrate the Expo in Milan, with food as the theme and so on, the food security of the developed world is the food insecurity of Africans. Because African governments are selling the lands of these people who are coming on those boat rides. They are dispossessed by their own governments because they're growing food they cannot consume, right, for storage for the Chinese, for the Middle Eastern countries, and some European countries in the name of food security. So it's very easy to see the structural reasons why people are displaced and why people go for softer grounds to survive and what kind of skills they bring with them. So it's not accidental that most of these people go work in the tomato farms and so on. That's the skill they brought with them, not a degree from a medical school, right? So those are some of the things that's been happening globally, which then makes the presence of these works even more important. Because it's like, what was happening in the 17th, 18th century? How has it changed in the 21st century? Are we still caught up in this historical alleyway and so on? So those are some of the things that make these works, I think, more interesting for the contemporary audience. That's a long-winded way of answering Francesca's question, but I'm a professor, I'm paid to be long-winded. Any more questions? Yeah? You have a question?
No.
Oh, okay. Okay. All right. So ideally, it should. I think the tour start from here, right? So it starts from here, but ends in the chapel, and you will see that display between subject object will become the obsession of most of the artists, especially by the time you end with the chapel. You will see from Ricardo Cavallari's project where he did extreme close-up of these blackamoors, and then he went around Florence taking headshots of people in Florence, right? So they're subjects, they live, they have a history, they have a story, but the blackamoors have no history except being part of property. So that kind of play you will see in different places. The other thing I want you to pay attention to is the way the works are playing on looking, how you're being looked at and how they're looking back at you. Because objectification happens from the way you look at people. So these artists kind of play with that thematically. All right, so we can start from here, and this is the work here of Deborah Willis, of course. Again, as you know, as I said, so we have three very important American artists who are award winners, etc. Deb Willis, who's also a professor here and also a collaborator on this project and the conference, she is one of those. She is a MacArthur Genius Award winner. So you will see three of those MacArthur Genius Award winners in this collection as well, in the exhibition here. You see them in both Bardini and Biagiotti as well. So it will be Deb Willis, Carrie Mae Wims, and Fred Wilson. And so these are big deal people, and I don't know how we swung it for them to even agree to have us here, but they gave us the opportunity to showcase their work next to people who are totally unknown. In America, nobody puts them with the same kind of people that we have done and so on. So, and they were really, really happy that we did that, because normally museums and galleries don't put them together with different generations. So this is our work. And this is down the road, right? The Stibbett collection. And at first I didn't know what to do with this work, but I kind of knew something will happen with it. And it's the magic of curatorials, where things you thought will be useless, they become like the cornerstone, and this is one of them. And of course, as you know, in this room with the guy that welcomes people here and the pair. And as you know, they're usually in the, hidden, right? Is there one there?
No, just this one.
Okay. Usually they're like in the background, not in the foreground. So in Bardini, we put most of the blackamoors in the foreground because Bardini didn't have most of them. So what we borrowed from here, we kind of showcase them as a foreground. But here, we let them stay in their traditional spots and then begin to insert other things around them. Yeah. And right as you come in this way, by the way, you'll be sick of some of this music happening in this way because we'll play it till the exhibition ends. The point is that I usually don't like quiet exhibition spaces. So it's not like, even Bardini is not that quiet, but generally much quieter. But Biagiotti is really noisy, so it's like a jazz thing happening. So here's the work of an Ethiopian artist called Ewol Erisku. He lives in the United States. But what he did was to use a Renaissance posture, right, to recast that posture by putting this girl in, and it's called The Girl with the Blackberry. So the Blackberry shows the contemporariness, but it also has the Ethiopian girl in it. But it's really a portraiture. It's a story about portraiture. But what he did was to change the kind of body in the portraiture. And that was his way. Yeah, it's Awol, A-W-O-L. By the way, that's the only thing that's not ready is the labels. They'll be,
We will have this
yeah.
up there.
Yeah, the labels will be there, and you have a list of the artists and so on. I promise. Yeah, yeah. We're still trying to get the right cardstock for the labels, but we'll get it right today. Yeah. So this is basically what you see with Ewol Erisku's work, but you will see his work also at Bardini, where he has a lot of works, including the girl with the bamboo earring. No, sorry, Biagiotti. Biagiotti, yeah. And then if you stay in this court here before we move forward, you will see the work of a Cameroonian photographer up there on the stairwell, and it's staring back, right, at that sculpture there. and it uses the backdrop even to signify the tapestries. But it's really, it's a perspective where we want you to look out there where these people are looking at changing or resignifying the way the blackamoors are produced here, right? So that's just to let you know before we encounter her normally. Then we'll come into this beautiful room. So in this beautiful room, I think you can take everybody here. In this beautiful room, what we did three things. We put three things because, as you know, with all the rooms in Villa La Pietra, they are choked up with so many meanings. So if you're an art historian, if you are a student of art history, will be like, what am I looking at? Why am I looking at 10 different historical periods at the same time? So here we inserted a video by Carrie Mae Weems called Italian Dreams, which basically begs the question about, can I ever be in the classics? Can I ever be? So it's about the fantasy and desire to be included in most classical art forms. So she talks about the exclusion, and it's a very well choreographed sequence of questioning why she cannot be a subject in art, right? And why she wants to be a subject in art. At Bardini, her work is called I Am Not Manet's Type, where she's looking at classical painters and so on to say, why doesn't my body not fit and be like the Mona Lisa and so on. So those are some of the questions she begs with this experimental video, which she made way back in, I think, 2009. And it's a very famous video. It's part of her reputation. And we decided to insert it subtly here. It has its own little subdued music. So it's very nostalgic, it's very questioning. And here we also included the mannequin that has Hortense's clothes and shoes. Now, this brings me to a very important experience in studying this space. In studying this space, I hear four voices. I hear four spirits, right? This is the African speaking now, right? Yeah. I feel four spirits. The spirit of Arthur and Hortense, and the spirits of William and Harold. With Harold, he had the fortune to be the last person to put things together. But as you and I know, when we put things together, we project to the energies of people who were part of those things. And Hortense's story in this house, by its absence, it speaks volumes, right? From the books she has in the library, the kinds of books she was reading, the kinds of lifestyle that she aspired to, and the kind of clothes she was wearing, especially at the later phase, were really big stories that anyone should be asking about. And so with Harold reorganizing this space as we inherited it, there is something about Hortense that's there but not there. And so we put two of her dresses and shoes to signal her presence in this works. Now, in Bergiotti and Bardini, you will hear me use the word divining, and because where I come from, artists are diviners of history. So, because the idea is that it's not just a historical statement, but it provokes people to think about history. And so I feel that in putting her works there, it divines her own story in this facility. And so the four stories, as I said, was of Hortense and Arthur, and of course William and Harold. The other, when you were gone, I was checking some stories about Williams's paintings, and I was relating the paintings by Williams to the paintings by Arthur. If you do psychoanalysis, it's a troubling relationship. You could tell, because his works were actually an erasure of his father's works, and because, of course, of the father's investment in the subjects he was painting. Yeah. Not to go into the legal issues, but anyway, when I looked at this works, I was like, what? This is amazing. So any art historian can do a big project looking at the works that Williams actually did side by side his father's. And then if you put Hortense in the middle, it then opens up a soap opera, right? And then you put Harold in it, it then becomes him as the narrator of that soap opera. Now, because I trained as a dramatist and so on, I needed to construct this drama in my head in order to know how to situate the exhibition in this space. I needed to imagine this setting and the role of these four spirits, or four individuals and their stories in this collection. Because I think each of them have their own little stories in this collection, and Harold had the good fortune of just being the last one standing and being able to coordinate and put things as they are. Now, the caution that it raises for us in the contemporary is to build in a little bit of, so we don't create mythologies, right, of any of these four people. It's important for us to open up gaps where we are actually questioning, but what was the relationship between them? Why was Hortense even here? She could have loved to be in America, which was even a different kind of society than here. So you begin to ask all of those questions for each of these characters. But when you put them together as a family, it makes sense that they collected what they collected. It also makes sense that they put things around the way they put things around. But it also makes you ask more and more questions. And I think that library is a huge mine to actually, if you take the kinds of books that were being read, who owned what book, etc., it is very interesting to look at. So, and I was also looking at other things which I wasn't thinking much about, of course, the lifestyle of Arthur, right, his fast cars and other stuff. What happened to those cars, by the way? Because that's kind of a good, interesting part of his life. Okay. And also even the landscaping of this place tells you another story. So all of these actually make this place an incredible laboratory for teaching and producing knowledge. And I'm hoping that many other people will come back and pick any little bit and build contemporary inquiries around them. Now, in this, so apart from Carrie Mae Weems and Hortense's dress and shoes, and if you notice the colors and choices, thanks to the team that helped with making sure it coordinates visually with the reds and the gold and so on with the rest of the room. And of course, up there is a kind of an anomalous image, right? It's called Her Highness, and it's done by a French Senegalese photographer called Delphine Diallo. And she has a whole series about hair and masquerading. So it's almost like what you see is not what you necessarily get, right? So in other words, because we have the blackamoors, they're not really the people behind the blackamoors. And so we played with that metaphor with that picture that was created by Delphine Diallo, who's French Senegalese photographer. She's now based in New York. And her work, you see more of her work at Biagiotti. So again, this was a very subtle interruption with what exists in this beautiful room. And that's the kind of approach we use everywhere, where we can just put only one little thing. So the next room we'll go into, it's more like a sonic interruption. It's a sound. And the sound, which you've been hearing, of course, you're familiar with Andrea Bocelli, right? Compatire is that song, we put it in that context to talk about, it's about goodbyes and departures. And blackamoors, the buying and selling and shifting of blackamoors is similar to the buying and selling and shifting of slaves. And so it's really the context of using that song that's familiar and yet that's unfamiliar in relation to the blackamoors. Yeah? Okay. If I'm sounding too abstract, let me know.
Do you know where Carrie Mae Weems filmed the scenes in
She shot them in, I think, in the American Academy. Yeah, that's where she did. Yeah. 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 I know this was also part of when she was a fellow at the American Academy. Yeah. Yeah. Which I think launched her big time afterwards. Yeah. And we didn't know what to, this space was a fascination. And because everything was constructed here, we decided to construct that screen inside this fake fountain. And so we had a lot of ideas, but Stefano and I did a lot of designs, but thankfully this was what Techniform could come up with quickly in short order. Right? All right.
Mention something about Africa, see you, see me.
Not yet. Yeah, I will. You can ask me that later. Yeah. Of course, these are our beautiful guys. Again, I just say, especially for people who are visiting this place, the tunic, the heritage, the way they are presented, it's not so much about what they look like, but what they're wearing, right? And how it fits to the rest of the decor. And that is what totally objectifies them. And I think for me, that's the fascination with this. And in this room, I remember I was going to ask this question because I feel this works here kind of obscured by the doors. If I had a way, I'll move them to the other side. But I think we have to leave things mostly as they are. But if you come into this room, you'll see what we've done to this room. We'll try to squeeze in. I'll go across. So this room, which as you know, is so small and yet so big. It's big because it brings the environment into an enclosed space. And there, we put this thing, which is really a screen that just plays back the words of the song. But then at the beginning of it, you'll see up the blackamoors, their pictures and stuff like that, and a very short poem about being bought and sold as an object of decoration. And then, so the song almost speaks about this object that has to go through several countries and so it becomes more about these objects rather than a true lover, right? So it almost becomes these loves who decorate your homes can leave tomorrow to be sold somewhere else. So that's why we put this up there. In looking for the right song for it, I got a lot of songs, and then I just thought, why not something Italian? And this was the most perfect song, which people even have it on their phones and so on. Because I remember the day I picked it, the cab driver that was taking me to the city's phone was playing this, and I just said, you gotta be kidding me. You know. But yeah, so that's the song. Of the blackamoors. Yes, of these, so you see images of these blackamoors. I was just saying that if I had my way, I would have had these guys on this side and the camera out there because they're kind of obscured by the door, but I know that could be a problem. But I just feel that the blackamoors are there at the background, of course, where they should be. But for the purpose of the exhibition, we may foreground them differently. But we'll have this conversation another time. Yeah.
Was this your idea?
The song?
The song, who's the artist? That created
Well, Andrea Bocelli?
No.
Oh,
The idea.
yeah, I did.
It's
Yes.
yours. Okay, this is your installation.
Yes, I did. But of course, you should thank Mr. Stefano for coming up with this idea, because I had this video to play here, and he came up with the best idea of making it not too intrusive and to add to the fantasy of the way this space is used. So I share the credit with Stefano. And I think this mirror does a lot to make this room bigger. And I think, again, as you see in other spaces, we played with the mirrors to reflect other objects in the exhibition. So maybe next time you hear the song, it will not be the same meaning anymore. It will be what? It's about the blackamoors and so on. But slavery. All right, we'll go. So in these two rooms on the right, I didn't do much with them. I will with one sculptural inclusion. So we kind of left those two rooms for now. Yeah, for now, yes. there's just one sculptural inclusion that I'll find space for, but it's not very intrusive. But we left those two rooms as they are, and instead we focused on the flow this way. And in this little hallway, I want to introduce you to the work of some artist. He's really crazy guy. Maybe we can open this up. This is an African-American artist called Derek Maddox. This work is actually in Bob Holmes's collection. Derek Maddox he frames things in very grandiose ways, but he frames almost things that are very trivial in very big ways. So if you look at the work at Biagiotti, which is called You See a Sinner, I See a Saint, there we have this grand frame with a very almost mundane image in the middle. So he draws attention to a way of seeing into what ordinarily would look like a mundane art piece. But this is called Blackamoor No More, and this is in response to the racism in the United States. And so a series of works he did will play on the history of that racism, especially as it projects to European history. It's very abstract, but deliberately so, because the subject is just too traumatic to keep showing all the time. The joke, well, it's not a joke. In the United States, the point is that the time people listen more to African American stories is when the stories are about the trauma and pain of African Americans, from the music to the paintings to the dance and so on. And people are just too tired of that. So you can't always be in pain. You want to find abstractions to that. And some of these artists deliberately create abstractions that are not just another expression of trauma, but that are actually playing with the stereotype. Yeah. All right, we're going to squeeze into this tiny room. So this was a kind of innovative way of putting it because it's on plexi, and our producer cum co-curator came up with this idea that why don't you put it somewhere here? And Technoform built this so that it could be a way of actually looking at it. Again, we'll be playing with perspective because there's going to be a sculpture on the opposite end of the. So you can, yeah, he's doing, I know, he came yesterday, yeah. So.
I was thinking how amazing a work that has a color like this bubblegum pink, which is not present in any of the works in our collection.
Right.
Is so powerful.
Right, right.
It comes right out.
Right.
It makes you rethink exactly what you're trying to
right,
do, rethink
right.
everything that's around it.
Yeah, absolutely.
In a very strong way.
Absolutely. So my goal is that anything you see changes the room. So it may fit a little, but it actually changes what you're seeing. Yeah.
Exactly.
Yeah. Yeah. All right. So I just move these a little so we can squeeze in. This is a very subtle room. Subtle, I was fascinated by, firstly, I started with these objects. Well, of course, I was later told they were actually from Naples, but I initially was looking at the blackamoors in here, and also that host history, if you're familiar with the Sicilian history, we tested the Moros, those two guys up there. I walked by the store yesterday, and he gave me more tuna. It's a new store in Florence, and they sell. And when Ellen and I went there, the first week they opened or something, so they gave us tuna and caper and everything from the south. Right. I took it to New York. So he saw me just walking by the street. He called me in, and they have even more beautiful ones there. I said, no, we've done buying this. We have 6 of them. So, so we bought those, and you see 4 more elsewhere staged. But we brought it into this room to begin again the history. This history is fascinating because I've been told so many versions of the history that in Sicily, the mythology is, of course, that a woman who was in love with a gallant Moor, and the Moor wanted to go back to his family. She had his head chopped off and had the head to, and started planting basil out of it and stuff like that. But I think ultimately it's a reference to the history of the Moors in Sicily, because of course it was an emirate. And of course, to purge that history, which happens everywhere, when you put the past and the present, is that you make the past objectify the present objectify the past. And I think this was part of the cliches of the Moors. Now, to talk about the term blackamoors, you have to remember it's a fusion between the Orientalist idea and the idea of Africans, because the Moors, of course, brought a very multinational cast of people into Europe. And most of the initial Africans, apart from the church later on, the initial large number of Africans were part of the militia of the Moors, right? And so the blackamoors, you notice they still have the same kind of iconography, like the turban and so on, or even the tunic they wear sometimes, gestures to the Orient, right? So you find this mixture, and that's why if you see the work of the Angolan artist in Biajoti, he has these big bellied guy on a couch with a turban and a black face. So he plays with that dual icon of the Orient and the African. So hence the blackamoors, right? Not just the Africans, right? They say they're Islamicized as well. So the idea is that they are Oriental and Muslim Africans. Which is interesting because majority of the Africans you find coming to Italy today are actually more Muslims than non-Muslims. And so I don't know what to do with that. But anyway, so I was reminded that this room also, these are from Naples, Francesca was telling me. So I kind of thought, oh, one of those magic moments where things correspond and so on, even as they stare at each other. But my original reference was this guy's carrying the clocks. Yeah, so that as they're carrying the clocks, I just felt that there's a kind of a correlation between that object and that. And when we had to build a platform, but we felt it was boring to just do a platform of the same height and so on, so we created a visual rhythm by changing the heights of the platform.
I'm sorry. So these they were made in Naples.
They were.
But they've been.
They're Sicilian. They're Sicilian. Yes, they're Sicilian. Sorry.
Connection with Naples?
No, they were southern Italy mostly. Yeah, they were southern Italy. You find them all over southern Italy actually, although they're Sicilian. Yeah.
Because you see these in Sicily,
Yeah.
Palermo, those little kind of, they become a picturesque souvenir.
Right.
But
Yeah.
it must be an old tradition, like in the 17th century.
Yeah. They have very big ones too.
Yeah, they have huge
yeah,
big
yeah.
ones on buildings.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think we were given gifts of it as their little cups. Alessandra Di Maio, who's from Palermo, where she has a lot of it from Palermo too. So she bought some of them as a gift for us. So yeah, but they're actually doing well in Florence because they just opened that store in Florence, and they have amazing, beautiful stuff there. Of different colors and combinations. But these, I thought, Ellen and I got them. Did they give you back your money? Right. So I know we had to buy them because we were working. I was about to tell her about this Testa de Mor, and she said, let me show you something. And when she did, we had no choice but to say, no, it was my fault. I said, we cannot see them and go away because I was traveling the next day to Abu Dhabi. So I said, whatever happens, you got to buy them. And that was what happened. So she bought them. The shop, I don't know, what's the name of the shop? Yeah, you should check it out. They're really amazing. Yeah, yeah,
Yeah, it is at the beginning, next to Ponte Vecchio.
yeah, exactly.
Sicily and more.
Yeah,
It's a little tourist stop.
it's a, it,
It's really hard to miss because they're in the
yeah,
middle.
yeah, and he was showing me the new arrivals, and they're really stunning. I tell you, I wish we could buy them, but there's no space. Yeah, I know. I was hearing your voice there.
They have always been huge collector's items in Sicily, and now, of course, there's an enormous re-interest in them because they were used with kind of no sense of their history.
Right.
Dolce & Gabbana, in a recent publicity campaign, they were featured prominently in their shop.
Yeah, and on dress, and earrings, and so on. So yesterday, I haven't told Ellen this yet, but yesterday I did an interview with New York Times, and she asked me, "Do you think there's a revival?" I said, "Oh yeah," and that scares me because our intention is not to create a revival, but actually, since we started talking about this, there has been an upsurge of interest in blackamoors, even more decoration, even more objectification, rings, earrings, pendants, and so on. So I know, and they're now encrusted with diamonds and stuff like that. I don't know where it goes, but the point is that there is an upswing. In fact, when people started complaining about the Dolce & Gabbana one, you know where they went to? They went to the old Brazilian representations of slaves where they had things in their mouth. So that's in their new collection. And so maybe sensationalism sells, but I think there is that. And I know they did ask if they can work with us, and no, thank you very much, because I know, I just felt, why are they talking to us? But anyway, Dolce & Gabbana and other fashion outlets, including jewelry makers, there's a new interest in them, and I hope we are not part of that stimulus package. But whatever happens, if it makes people read history and deal with the crisis of history, that's fine. Yeah. All right, next door is a magical work of a South African artist called Mary Sibande. So these are done by artisans by different factories. Yeah.
The discretion, how discreetly they're placed, you know, the real old blackamoors and how in your eyes
Exactly.
those are.
Exactly.
It's very contrasting.
Exactly, but that's part of the dialogue, really, to say these works are not going to be in the background. Right. They're going to be in the foreground, right. And they're going to bring out those things in the background.
Right.
Yeah,
in your face.
Yeah. This work is called "A Terrible Being Has Been Born." A terrible beauty, thank you. Not being, I kept saying be. A terrible beauty has been born. It's by the work of Mary Sibande from South Africa. Originally, I wanted the sculptural work, but it would take us 6 crates to load up these works, and she has to send people to build them up, and we had to find a space for them. So it's like it will fill up almost these 2 rooms, right? So we were going back and forth with her because she does huge sculptural work. She works on the idea of domesticity and black women in South Africa because her mother was a domestic servant during apartheid in South Africa. So she's still working on, according to her, getting rid of the ghost of her mother as a servant, right? And so most of her sculptural work reflects that. But she looks at the superwoman behind the servant. Right, so you see in some of the sculptures, the servant is wearing the T-shirt of Superman or Superwoman, and so, because she's looking at the strong women behind the women who are made to be servants. And here she plays with the same metaphor of the strength of the birth of a certain beauty in the face of objectification and oppression, right? So, and it's a beautiful work. The light is important to this work, and we still don't have the right light to it, but it's supposed to be a little hint of daylight so that it brings out the reflection. So photographically, the reflections on the purple is so important. But in terms of the formal aspect of the work, purple plays a big role in African art. Purple and black colors are really some of the primary colors that African artists used to project people who are subjects of art and so on. And so everything that goes from purple back to its original color and black onto gray is one of the things you see in most of the artworks by the artists. So for people in African context, they get it just by the color. They get the superwoman behind the oppressed woman in the story, just from the colors. And again, it's subtle, as you were saying. It's kind of, this is in your face, of course, because you have to see it, you have to look at it. And it troubles the discrete blackamoors that are kept in corners. Yeah. And thanks to the guys who helped achieve the dream of putting it up here. Yeah. So in this room, I'll wait till everybody come in. Oh, I never noticed that. In this stunning room, what we did here, there's going to be music playing, and the music that will be playing will be early jazz music of the early early part of the 20th century. I'm going to play the music of a woman who was one of the most famous jazz musicians, born about the same time as Hortense. And the song is "It's Gotta Be You," stuff like that. So it's because this is a big entertainment room, and we felt the need to actually bring an image of Hortense in this room, because whilst these guys may have ideas of how to buy things and so on, we just also keep feeling that the narrative of this space as not only an entertainment space, but just the broad narrative and energy of it has her presence in it. So that's why I kind of kept insisting, and luckily, because as I know, these clothes are very fragile, and but I'm glad that we were able to put one of them here, just as in the other room. So thank you to your team for helping us doing this. Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
Not historic, no.
Not historic. Yes.
It's been mounted, it's been treated so that it can stay.
It's from the collection.
It's historic. Yeah.
No,
Yeah.
it's a question
Yeah.
because we haven't seen before.
Oh, I see.
It's never been shown, it's the first
Oh, really? Oh, I feel so honored to have it here. Yeah, yeah, I know. Well, I liked it's mostly for the ornamentation and the mixture of gold and black, and that yeah.
All of our just because there's nothing that's not.
no, there are a few that are not.
Hmm.
I mean, we don't have the labels on all of them.
I thought they were all cheated.
So again, when I was starting earlier by saying these people collected things that are so disjuncted, so you would see the Chinese with the Buddha and the Christian iconography, that whole mixture. We thought, why don't we put something that's a little bit also adds to the mix? And we brought the tapestry work of a Jamaican visual artist called Ebony Patterson. And we put that tapestry to go opposite those two blackamoors on the other side of the wall. And these actually, the story in Jamaica, which is also a class-divided society, and these are what they call garrison kids. These are kids who grow up in the ghettos, but they have a lot of style, and they have a lot of way of speaking themselves into culture in what's called dance hall music. So they're really from one of the ghettos in Jamaica, and she creates this ornamental photograph with also referencing the classics in the backdrop in terms of the design of the backdrop of this photo, and even the carpets in it. And so we thought this would be the perfect room for it. We thought it had been elsewhere, but this became like the perfect room because it adds to the color and the kind of disjunctive mixture of things. Like you can see the Chinese thing on the corner, and you see the mirror. But what it references really are those blackamoors there. Those are the objects. These guys, even in abject poverty, are projecting themselves as subjects of culture. So if you check out YouTube, if you put in dance hall, it's really very raunchy, very bold, and they're not afraid of their sexuality and their gender and so on. And so it's really like in your face representation. And she captures them in a, so she made it because there was a classic film made in Jamaica called Dance Hall Queen, which is also the story, almost like a Blackamoor story. And so there's a whole genre of music, way of dressing, and attitude that comes from the ghettos. And this is a picture of that, which she makes tapestries of. This is the only one of these, but it's in a series. And she was supposed to come here, but she went to the Biennale in Cuba, in Havana, and they stole the one she hung up in a public, they stole it in a museum. So she's like, I hope you still have this one. I said, oh yeah, they got to shoot their way through here to take it. Oh, because it's a kind of a gangster thing. They don't want their identity. It's because in the police, they look around for gangsters and so on. So it's a way of covering their faces, so it's masking, and it plays on the idea of masking and masquerading, just like that hairdo. So it masks, but it's also a masquerade. So what you see is the person behind the object. And they also wear makeup as well. And in her case, she also does a lot of gender bending. So you don't see hyper-masculine men. So sometimes you see men, both gay men and straight men. And so she plays with a mixture of gender and so on. Because she's also an advocate for gay and lesbian representations in the mainstream. So she inserted that in a bigger picture. All right. Every time I come into this room, I don't feel like leaving it, but it's so beautiful. So in these rooms, again, our subtlety continues. Of course, we kind of staged these in different height levels just so as to create a visual rhythm. Of course, that's the pairs of the Testademoros. And then thanks to Alexa for giving us a less warm light here, because the initial light was a bit too hot. And I think we had concerns about it lighting up other things. And she came up with this very subtle light. And of course, here we have the work of Fred Wilson, which was at the Venice Biennale many years ago. Two Venice Biennales ago? But anyway, it's also about the Blackamoors and so on, where he had a major installation called Speak of Me as I Am. And this is from Bob Holmes's collection as well. I think we got 3 works from his collection. 2 of them are here, and 1 is in Biajoti. Again, it is really subtle, but also in your face. There's one video that's going to be showing there. It's about the local artists of African descent They performed in front of museums and art places. So they're here, but they're not in there. It's called Presence and Absence. You remember when we filmed that? Yeah, that's what's going to be on that screen. Yeah, yeah. So it's about why they're not in this collection, but they're in this collection. So it plays with that object subject.
And that's you.
Yeah, I made that. Yeah, I made that with the choreographers, Nora and Ananya. And so what you get with that is it's almost the same idea as Riccardo Cavalleri's. It's the same idea, but this time with videos of these local people. They live in Florence. In fact, I saw them yesterday.
As you know.
Yeah. Oh, you know them, right? I know how you know them, right? Yeah.
Just tell me the name again of the artist.
Fred Wilson. Fred Wilson, yeah. Fred Wilson.
I asked Christina, Alina, we should buy some catalogs of the artist's work because Fred Wilson is one of the
Yeah.
most important artists in
Yeah.
this show.
Yeah.
And if people want to read more about their work, we
Yeah. He's also one of the MacArthur Genius Award winners
Yeah.
with Deb Willis and Carrie Mae Weems.
Yeah, because I saw this already somewhere published.
Yeah. And his work at the Bardini, his work is the candelabra with fire extinguishers. Yeah. So it's like, wait, that's a long story, but it's we were extremely lucky to get that work. Because as Elizabeth knows, the galleries or museums don't like to give or lend those out. So we were so lucky. And it was also interesting that we had to convince the space that, you cannot have this guy's work. Because you have to explain to people who know his work why you trivialized or not take it seriously. But she actually got it. I think she Googled and she did other stuff. And I sent her some stuff.
This is framed as it is in Bob Holmes' collection.
Yes,
Correct.
it is framed.
You've chosen very ornate frames for the things that you framed here.
Well, that's a good question. So in general, because as you all know, I also curate photography. And when I curate photography, I like to really showcase the art of the printing of the photograph. So I don't usually like to have photographs in a frame, generally. That's why I print them and mount them on aluminum, and so that they actually come out for themselves. You see the composition and the product itself that's been produced. But in this exhibition, in order for them to fit with the rest of, I kind of started framing some works. Like the ones you've seen so far, they're framed. But in general, if you go to Biagiotti, you will see most of them are not framed at all. Because when I went to film school, photography was the foundation. And so when I started teaching, I was teaching theater, film, and photography. And so I have this fetish about the photograph and how it is made and the paper it's made on and stuff like that. So it's not just on the content, but on the artifact itself. So it's a good question because I normally would not frame it like this. I'll really make a bigger, and I also usually make bigger prints. And I would have made it a bigger print. I think the original was actually huge. It was huge. And because it was supposed to show that perspective of the canals and so on. Yeah. So in the next rooms, there are videos. Because it's a bit tight, I should just introduce them. In the first room is a video that was shot here by an American filmmaker, Kevin Iverson, your buddy, yeah, right? And the film is very interesting because it's a dramatization of the story of the Medici, Alessandro Medici. I'm not going to tell you more, but I'll give you time so that we can split in between the rooms so you can see them. Now, the other room is the work by a small Italian collective called Influx. And this is Marco Ambrosi, Laura, and Caterina. They put together, they've been working in electronic art. And I wanted them to use electronic art to express the history of the collection originally. And then we started tweaking things here and there to say, why don't you just tell a story of the Blackamoors? And they worked with a Somali-Italian writer who's been here as well, Christina Uba. They used her Somalian lullaby to talk about the story of the black moors. And the lullaby basically says, God give you the gifts to have good legs so that you can run away. So you can interpret that anyhow. What it tells you is that if you're in trouble or if you need to migrate, you need good legs to do that. And so that's what that story is about. But so because we may split in between, but you should see both videos because you may catch it at different points. They're short videos. They're like 3 minutes long. You should catch them at different times. I wish I could start them from the beginning. Stefano, can I? Can I start? Can you help me out? Yeah. Just so that people get it from the beginning.
Have we moved things here?
No.
No?
Not me.
Have things moved here?
Few, yeah.
Yeah.
Oh, okay.
Because we have people passing.
Yeah. So we opened the exhibition to go past the traditional tour by coming this way. And also, yeah, we're starting from the top? Yeah. Okay, let's come into this room. This room, we have just the video juxtaposed with one of Lyle Ashton Harris' pictures. And some people can come into the next room and you can come back here. Yeah, we can reduce this. Okay. Yeah. And so this is the work. It's funny. And here you see one of Lyle's works on the wall there. No, here, both rooms. Yeah, there's that famous one. Yes. And then, of course, the blackamoors, one's a marble and the clock at the back. They're all here. And then this video, actually, you can look at it from the mirror. There's a mirror, yeah. So, but it's best to look at it this way, but we use the mirror to reflect and create perspective. Yeah. That's a very funny video. Yeah. It's very funny, though, to have the Medici. I got people. All right, we're almost, one more step, though. We're going upstairs, but after this. All right, there's going to be a label. No, there's going to be a label on that label.
Very hard on inventory.
Oh, that's the end, right? Okay, it's okay. Let's just let it run so that it doesn't mess up. Yeah. So it has a lot of poetry and visual images and song. Actually, in Biagiotti, it's on a larger screen. You see all the colors. The colors are very important in this as well. In Bardini, they're on the smaller screens, yeah. Okay, that's the beginning, yeah. So that's the collective that made the work. That's the end, though. It's going to start now. Yeah. Maybe you aren't talking to the end of the. So hopefully you saw the Medici going crazy. I think we can squeeze it into the back, huh? Okay. We can squeeze to the back, right? We'll put this on. Okay. Yeah. Yeah, this is, they're called influx, but it's Ambrosi is the leader of the group. And you know, I've worked with Ambrosia before. Yeah, yeah. And that's Lyle on the wall. Yeah. We, huh?
But not actually.
Yeah, well, no, Lyle's photograph. Yeah. Yeah. Well, you all know Lyle, and you're not, you expect that kind of work too. So, so this one is really very experimental, and I was very pleased with the technology they used to tell the story. Yes. That's by Kevin Iverson. Yeah, you remember you were saying you have. Yeah. Yeah. So if you look closely, you'll see some familiar objects from this collection. And it plays firstly with the botanical idea of Africans, which you see in Bardini in one of the works by Vasco Araujo. Yeah. So this plays with that, and that Blackmore upstairs is part of that botanical idea. This is familiar, right? So, which is in Bardini now, right? So uses the whole idea of African objectification and its resources. And for most of you who don't know, Marco Ambrosi was actually born in Congo. Yeah.
Had photographs in the exhibition you produced.
Yeah, yeah. And of course, this is the story of Patrice Lumumba, who was murdered by the CIA. In other words, everywhere there's an attempt to be independent, it's stifled. And so this is one of the example iconography. This uses the statistics of the migration stories and from news items and so on. And it's looking at these Blackamoors leaving, going back to Africa, and the real people coming back the other way in terms of migration. So it plays with that concept of departures of the object and entry of new subjects. And this image is from this collection as well. And I think here is the whole concept of the theatricality of what the collection as well. So that's so put them under the Mediterranean and they're equivalent to the top. And so. And again, the poems was from the Song of Solomon and so on. So it's kind of a biblical reference as well. Hence the soundtrack, which is a religious soundtrack. So you notice this is a bit more quieter and subtle, whereas that one is kind of loud and in your face because it's again to do with the nature of the rooms, right? So that room is where it's his office, he sits and contemplates, and we tilted the chair a little bit so that the video is almost like an interruption if Harold was there. And here it's kind of as part of the larger decor. You can pause and take a look at this and look at the rest. So it problematizes every object you see on the wall. Right? Okay, I'm almost done with you, but there's just one floor upstairs. But on our way upstairs, we'll go this way and you'll see another interruption. And just take a close look at it. It's the work of a Senegalese artist called Omar Diop, who was the guy on our poster. And so on. Okay. Yeah.
The video that you did upstairs with the ballerina, was that used at all? With that Marco?
Yeah, that's the one that's going to be on that screen.
Ah,
Yes,
okay,
yes.
okay.
Yeah. So this work is by Omar Diop, who is also a fashion photographer originally. Omar actually just won a big prize at the, he's doing very well, and our exhibition actually gave him extra oomph. And so he went to France and he won the big photo festival in Arles. He's getting a lot of interest in newspapers, BBC, Al Jazeera, and so on, and CNN. Yeah. So yeah, him. Yeah.
I just found that last week.
The guy in the post.
No, the article that I gave out.
Oh, I see. Yeah, he's doing.
It was his work that covered the scaffolding.
Yeah.
Yeah.
At the,
At
Yeah.
the Prato Vale where we did the concert.
and the painting.
It's a big,
Yeah. This, so here, if you look closely, it's full of contradictions, right? So these are the old idea of Senegalese women, right? They sit around, they drink tea, they have their ablution kettle, which as Muslims you have to clean up before you pray, and so on. And on the other side are the modern Senegalese women. You can see from their shoes, their laptops, and so on. But what he was doing, he was actually referencing Micheline Thomas, who did a similar work by showcasing American women, African American women, in this kind of spectrum. So again, artists who are across the diaspora are referencing each other's style, but he used the Senegalese models to represent his story. It's very colorful and it's very intense. And one of the things about African photography, just so you know, is that the idea of polychrome, multicolors, because the idea is to use visual rhythms as the backdrop to the subject. So you notice either the clothes they are wearing is multicolored or multi-visual, rhythmic. So they use a lot of visual rhythms in demarcating the subject. And this came from the very early African photography tradition where they moved from the colonial mugshots, right, into the studio as a fantasy space. And as a fantasy space, they use African textiles of multiple colors to generate the visual rhythm. And that's why he is responding to that on the African continent, but he's also responding to the similar work done by an African American artist, Micheline Thomas, who is also in the exhibition. You see one of her works upstairs. So it's a kind of a good dialogue between two generations across the ocean. And I think in his recent interview on BBC, he talked about how he's actually re-signifying African photographic history. So originally this would have been in black and white, but he's bringing new colors into them. And so he's doing exactly what we're doing. And it was just one of those magic that he was like the perfect artist for this exhibition. And we were in different parts of the world doing the same thing. And when I contacted him, he did not hesitate at all by just saying, yes, yes, yes. And he came here, he had a great time, and he was really, really touched by it. And he kept saying, you have to come to Senegal so I can treat all of you like kings and queens. Yeah. But he was very, very happy that we gave him the opportunity here. He's a really humble, nice guy. And he keeps working. He's doing another version on Africans in the Indian Ocean. And I'm eager to see how that goes.
Are these the same models left and right? They are the same two women, aren't they?
Yes, they are. Yeah. Good thing you caught it. Yeah, yeah. It's also thanks to the technology of Photoshop. Yeah, yeah, yeah. It's a good blending. If normally he wanted it to be in this size, normally left to my own devices, it would be like massive. Yeah, but yeah, yeah, yeah. But I thought this was a good place to put it, just to again ask the question like the one up front. It's like, what's it doing here? But again, if you answer the question deeply, it will be like saying, what's anything here doing here? Because they don't belong to the same time and period, but they're just put together like that. So we're continuing the energy of the collection itself. So we're not bringing anything new, but we're continuing the narrative of the collection. All right, almost done. It's an intriguing space, though.
I love Fred Wilson. I mean, I love it. I don't like where it is.
Oh, really?
I think it's hidden.
It's hidden?
So I think it's a little bit,
Subdued?
yeah.
Yeah.
And I think Bruce picked out one of the reasons. I think the frame hides it.
Well, yeah, because as you know, I don't like it framed, but that's Bob's collection. He likes to frame all his works.
Maybe we could find someplace.
Yeah. Well, this work came out so well.
Yeah, it's beautiful.
Actually, Stefan and I kept playing with it almost step by step.
He loved this project.
And he did so well with that. All right. Maybe we should open this just in case before we go that way. Of course, our lovely friends, and also on the stairway. Yeah. So we're going to first go into the bedroom, which is something originally I was not supposed to do.
No, I think this one you can.
Okay.
I'm going to show you that there was an empty wall.
Okay.
That's the bedroom back there.
Oh, okay. But this is an interesting space on its own. Talk about subtleties. So this is a place where when I first was thinking about this idea, I kept thinking Harold's ghost must be like, okay, these people are gone too far. By juxtaposing some of the religious iconography with some of these. But I kind of thought at that time they were going far as well. So I was comforted by that, by the history of this collection. So you can interpret what we've done here in many ways, because not everything belongs, but also it's kind of plays with the idea of the sexual objectifications that happens. And what other photographer but Lyle Ashton Harris to play with that? But we also used the setting of the Villa La Pietra to tell the story. So if you look from this side, which is the guy who played the Medici, because he's local. he's also an artist whose works over here. So because he's local, he's always at our disposal. And so his work is there, and then there as well, and up there with Mr. Ricardo, who shall remain anonymous because he has hair now. And then you can look down across the hallway. You will notice that it references that object that's at the front of the hall of the stairwell. Right? So this room, it kind of provokes, and it's meant to be provocative for the spectator. So they should be asking, what, why, and stuff like that, because it's meant to really provoke. But if you really answer the question of the why and the what, you realize that you can extend it to everything in the collection. As even when you go to big collections like Bardini, you ask yourself, why are these things here? Because they're just stalking across time and space. And we deliberately put this to continue that narrative of talking across time and space and inserting different kind of meanings. Yeah, that was, yeah, well, we had to use the hook, right? So
Probably say this because everything had to do everything with the constraint of not.
well, we had to work within the structure of the space without destroying the space, of course. So I thought this was a brilliant idea from Stefano, and then the movers kind of helped us accomplish it. But this was a brilliant idea to use a discrete kind of hanging device. But instead of putting another triptych to match the triptych below, we kind of used a diptych. Yeah, so then we used it in a kind of non-corresponding shape, which is what we had done also at Bardini with the works of Michelin Thomas, where the works were so large. When we ordered them, we expected them to be this small. When they came, they were like twice the size of this table, and we thought the best way is to use them as a sculpture. And that was why we displayed them like that. So this is kind of a continuation of that. So the way things are presented here also points to the way they're presented in the other two venues, stylistically. But again, for anyone to get the full story of the exhibition, they have to see the other two exhibitions. And I would suggest that if they start from here, they should go to Bardini and then go to Biagiotti, because that's really like the place that it really throws it at your face. And with Bardini, it continues the subtlety. Yeah. All right. Okay, we'll go to the next room there. What's that room called? The ballroom? And the other one down is the dining room. Yeah. Yeah, thanks. So it'll be interesting how you tour this place with people, right? So. Here it's the most subtle, I would say, the most subtle insertion here. Because when you look generally, you keep thinking, where is it? Yeah. Yeah. If you begin to ask yourself, where is the work that's supposed to be about resignification? Well, just look, you have to look closely to notice that painting, the content, whereas the style may match the rest of the works on the wall, the content is kind of troubling and different. And so this is the work of a South African painter called Johannes Fokela. Unfortunately, when he was here during the opening, this work was still in customs or was still on its way. And so he didn't have the benefit of having...
It was drying for a very long time.
Yeah. Because he actually did the work for this exhibition. So this work, like the other painting in Biagiotti, is done for the exhibition. And so, again, he kind of recast a Vermeer painting, and he puts up the whole idea of objectification and prostitution in place. He even references the United States through a very subtle hint with the US flag. And then he puts both the Blackmore and the woman there, and those guys with their credit cards, right, up there. So it's kind of the classic, but not the classic. and it's a kind of a parody of the classics. It resignifies the classics, and that's why we put it there. We framed it so that it will fit the way things are hung here, and thank God there was a tapestry that's no longer there. So, right, so it kind of gave us a place we could play with in terms of the inclusion. Again, as I said, when you come into this room, even when you have your seminars and so on, you probably just think, wait a minute, what's it doing here? But generally you'll ask yourself, where is it? And so it's a little mystery. And there it is. So here it's less in your face, and it's kind of more subtle. All right, so we have two last rooms on the...
I want to notice the screen again.
Yes, I did, yeah.
That's the fact that there are screens, no? That is kind of
In the painting?
Yeah.
Yeah.
and then it's like kind of playing, I don't know.
It's magic.
That's why, because the art is cool.
Yeah. It's magic. Because you don't remember what you've seen, but when you're putting things together, yeah. It's like when you decorate your home, right? Later on, you keep thinking, wait a minute, why is this corresponding, right? But yeah, those screens really work well, yeah. But I love this painting, and he's already found a buyer for it. Yeah. So I said he has to wait. He wants to sell next year, not this year. It's a museum. Yeah.
It will be given back. It's a really temporary exhibition.
It's a traveling. Ideally, it was a traveling exhibition, but this is the first leg of it. But for every showing it goes anywhere else, we'll have to do new contracts with the artists. But also, more importantly, some artists or their galleries may want the work back, but we'll add more artists as it goes along. But this was presented for this place in specific. So the idea is it will return.
Technically, it all goes back to the artist.
Yeah.
Technically, because the hope is that it will travel and there's some expression from other places.
Yeah.
In which case, we'll ship it to the next venue. But it doesn't belong to us.
Right.
It belongs
Yeah.
to the artist, even though we constructed some of it.
We constructed some, but like the photographs, but these ones were made by the artists and lent to us directly. And I think it's a good way for them because it adds value to the sale, to the resale of this work. So, for instance, exactly, because, yeah.
One thing I want is that eventually you're going to have a catalog, right?
Oh yes, I like the word eventually. We have to have a catalog. There is a catalog that has everything in it. The different.
Decontextualized, not in context.
In context.
In context.
Yeah,
There's
yeah.
some photos
Of the works as they are. Yeah, in the installation.
Because that's very important.
Yeah, in fact, we did. Ricardo finished that 2 weeks ago.
Yeah, he needs to come up.
He comes to do this one. Yeah,
Sorry?
He has to do these.
yeah. Yeah, because he hasn't done VLP. Yeah. That's true. That's true. Yes. Huh? Yes, ask. No, wait till we get to the next room.
Okay, wait.
Because there's a photographs there. Yeah. All right, one last room and we're done. I like this space also because of the Magi's.
Did you hear that Bardini's show in October is canceled?
What do you mean?
We can keep it up.
Oh, yeah. So this, of course, those little figurines, the story of the three Magi's, I think, kind of begins to subtly hint to that. But I'm sure during your tours, people ask about those, maybe, if they notice them. Yeah. But in this room, as you know, there are blackamoors on opposite sides. And of course, there is a clock out there, but then it's actually the mirror reflection of that work at the back that's the inclusion, and it plays with the idea of looking back, right? So that's the work of another South African, Zanele Moholi, which is on this wall. But the way I kind of imagined it was to look at it through the mirror, right? But then you can look at it directly in relation to these other blackamoors, because it's like a counter text to these blackamoors here.
It's interesting also how many blackamoors are holding time devices.
Yeah, yeah, exactly. Yeah,
It's increasing now.
yeah, and in fact, yeah, yeah.
Journey through time as well.
Right, right. So some people who know me well is that I'm obsessed with the idea of time. Not that I keep it well, but yeah. But I'm doing a film called A Merchant of Time, and it's about going through different historical times and the artworks that reflect that. And it starts from Mauritania and ends up in Italy. So I suspended that film, which was stimulated by this project, so we can do this. So that's like my next, yeah. So time is a big deal, even in the writings that I do about these works. That's why I was referring to it earlier about each work represents a different time and place. Yeah, but then it's the dialogue between these times that actually, yeah. Well, in Tisch School of the Arts, where I earn my daily wage, my daily bread, we kind of tell the students to play with the idea of multiple utopias and multiple times, called heterotopia. So we teach them how to create art that takes the audiences in and out of different times and places. So for photographers, filmmakers, theater makers, and so on. And so this is kind of at the back of the setting of the work. Yeah. All right, no more professorial talk. The last room. So again, the continuation of the botanical idea of Africans is in those two. This also is a very popular genre in Germany. So the Germans actually use these to reflect apothecaries or pharmacies. Yeah, those two. Yeah, not the tapestry, the sculpture. Right. And they're in a pair as well. This is more popular in Germany than in Italy. And again, the Germans use this kind of botanical idea to reference medicine and so on. So in pharmacies and apothecaries, you see these images more. They also have them in Germany in terms of beer factories. And also you find them in terms of sweets, confectionery, chocolates, and stuff. Yeah. So you will find a lot of references to just that botanical idea of Africans. But in between, you begin to see different things. You remember, these two photographs are from a Mozambican artist called Mario Marcelao, and they are studio portraits. And again, they play with that history of African photography, of using visually rhythmic materials and so on. So those people who are familiar with old African photography history will see that in this work. But they're also, as the subject, they contradict their objectification. And we felt this was the best way to present it, and thanks to these folks who came up with this conical idea. And so it's a back and front photo of different kinds. And on the windows, you see two different performative photographs. They're not just looking back at you like these ones are. So up there, you will see Micheline Thomas, an African-American artist. And on the other side is the work of another American colleague who teaches at NYU Abu Dhabi called Joanne Savio. And you'll see Joanne's works in the other venues. They are the light boxes that we made in Bardini and in Biagiotti, because she did a whole photo series on the Alvin Ailey Dance Company, where this is a black body as a subject of stories. And so we juxtapose her work with some of the blackamoors as well. Yeah. So this is where it is. Now, Elizabeth is going to ask me about my history with photography. I did an exhibition which was here some years back. I don't know.
Ask your question.
But
That's not
your question, right?
You didn't ask us.
Right.
I didn't
Yeah.
I think that this exhibition is pretty clear, is also about gazing and looking and the way they use things, because I feel that, once you catches somebody's eye, then that person becomes visible.
Yeah.
So it plays on this.
Absolutely.
So the title of the exhibition that you curated a few years ago is Africa's You See Me. And
It's pretty much.
in Florence,
Yeah. Yeah.
and it was all photography, but I was curious as to what's the dialogue between the two? Is it a continuation, or is it just like position, is something subtle? What's the conversation between the two?
Right. So I have an answer and a comment. The answer is yes. It's because Africans are mostly overrepresented in photography, but not as the subjects of the photograph. They're either in natural environments or in safaris or in all kinds of crazy anthropological images. When I did the previous exhibition, Africa See You, See Me, the idea was to see how contemporary African photographers have changed the gaze through the skill of photography on one hand, and on the other hand, to look at non-Africans who are in dialogue with them. So that's why you had a lot of European and American artists in that particular exhibition. It's the same format with this as well. Although that one, we use the technology of photography. Here, we use the statues of the Blackamoors to actually look at the reversed gaze in resignification. So there is that continuity. But, so the comment about it is because when we were preparing the show, I spoke to Elizabeth sometimes 4 or 5 times a day. So I think she got the concept of this like so early that it was easier for her to even second guess my impulse, because sometimes she would just do things like that. I thought maybe I explained it to her before, but because she got the concept. Again, I think it's part of an illustration of collaborations between all the people who were working with this, that just that moment where, because you get it, it's easy to add to it, because as those of us who work in the art industry know, it's always a collaborative process, and the main idea allows other people to creatively put more into it. So beyond just shooting the contracts and other things and the finances and so on, I felt that Elizabeth got the basic idea of this exhibition from the beginning, and it made it so easy for her to actually say, but why don't you have this, or why do you have that? And I kept thinking, wow, she is a curator. So I really appreciate that, and I think, yeah, I know. I thought, and I promised her that after this, she would want to be doing this continuously. so.
That's wishful thinking on your part.
Yeah, but then I think it's also, but what has happened, because this project took a long time, that almost everybody involved in it became part of that big story. So I just want to use this, which is the last room, to really thank everybody on the staff who actually got it as well and put in their own bits into making this a reality. I mean, every one of you did play a big role in what actually constitutes the exhibition, not only here, but also in the other 2 venues, but more importantly, in the conference that actually gave it history and theory and so on. So for me, it's been one of the best experiences in NYU to work collaboratively across distance and time, and so it kind of feels like a new family and friendship that actually these are the artifacts of that relationship. And so I really felt that most of you, like Stefano, who I thought was like, I don't have to say it, and he gets it, and he goes to bring things to make it happen. I thought all of those things worked so well. So I really thank each and every one of the staff members who actually gave us all the support to make this a meaningful exhibition. And I'm hoping you are experts on it, and you can add more stories to it, and so on. But I really want to thank everybody for making this happen. So thank you, thank you. Oh, the chapel is on our way out, so I'll just show you. It's not a lot, so it's on your way out anyway to lunch or something. So, yeah. But I hope that it changes the way you see this place a little bit. Yeah. And I'm hoping that more projects begin to pick on other things. I can hear Helen saying, not yet, because this project has legs. That could be interesting. You have all these Chinese vases and Japanese. Yeah. You have Japanese as well.
Better yet, I may have a sponsor.
You know, the Japanese have a lot of funds too.
You know this Tish guy, right?
Oh, yeah. In musical theater? Oh, no, I don't know. At NYU? Oh, well, we have alums who live in Hong Kong.
That's who it is.
Um,
It's just here.
uh,
I'll talk about it later.
yeah, because there are a few
That was
alums.
very nice, by the way. To think of.
Oh,
And they're very
this is what we do.
I know. She did it really nicely.
Hello. Almost finished. Yes. There may be a little bit more. You were counting, Christina? There could be one more. Yeah. So, what is this? A crib? Like a baby crib? Okay. You get diverse visitors with different needs. I feel like a priest here. Well, so in this room, normally this room could be the beginning or the end. And again, it plays with subject object. And on that wall, of course, Riccardo Cavalleri's work, which actually has contributed a lot. In Bardini, what Riccardo did with Naylor was that they actually got stories from the people they met locally, and they wrote those stories on little pieces of paper. So in Bardini, you notice that there's a lot of trashy paper on the floor. They're not really trash. They're actually the stories of the people in the photographs, which he juxtaposed with the objects. So you should, if you're in Bardini, you can pick up anyone randomly and please put it back as well. Yeah. But they're really stories. They did an ethnographic story of the people they asked to photograph. And I'm hoping that at some point he will be able to do some more work on that material, because they've traveled around Florence, talked to a lot of African Italians and so on, and their stories is what they try to capture. And I'm hoping he's able to do more portraits.
We also have a student project last semester where students did interviews, and they created a book.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
With the immigrants?
Yeah.
Oh, wow. So
Based
on Riccardo's?
Black Italia series.
Oh, okay.
Goes out of this,
Yeah.
et cetera.
Yeah. No, it's amazing, because also in Biagiotti there is the video made by a Moroccan filmmaker of the Murids in Florence. And I just explained that because almost 98% of the Senegalese you see selling those selfie sticks or anything else, they are actually Murids. And immigration is a fundamental part of their religious mission. They're supposed to go anywhere in the world, buy and sell things, and send some of the proceeds to their main mosque in Touba in Senegal. So every one of those guys you see on the streets, not all the money they make goes to them. A large chunk of that money goes to their mosque in Touba. And in Senegal, in that part of West Africa, the history of their own ethnic group is related to the history of the Moors, because they ran some of the early empires that the Moors overran and used most of them to join the militia that the Moors brought to Europe. And so they are part of that. They constitute this Sufi Islamic group, and they're called Murids. And Mecca is not the center of their religion. It's a place called Touba in Senegal. They control the economy of Senegal. And they also, no politician wins an election without them. And when you want to see them in their religious outfit, they wear multicolored clothes, and the religious ones have dreadlocks. And so in Biajoti, you see pictures of them in their original context in Senegal. And then you see upstairs, there's a video of the Murid community here in Florence. And you can actually see them worship. So after they do all of this on Fridays and most evenings, they meet and they have a big carpet and they read the Quran until they go into a trance. And their performance tradition has influenced contemporary Senegalese dance, contemporary Senegalese music. So if you listen to the music of Youssou N'Dour, Baba Mal, it's all coming from the Murid practices. So this is a way of saying that, like what Ricardo did, was that these people actually have stories if people talk to them. They have deep historical stories, and they're not just blank. And I think what Ricardo and Nela have done is to actually help to give those stories alive by juxtaposing their subjecthood with the objecthood that the Black Amors present. Again, since this show is also about the reverse gaze, these works by the same woman whose work is in the stairwell, Angèle Essamba, she's from Cameroon, and you see her work also in Bardini. This is from her series of works. Most of the photographers in this show I've worked with before, so it's an ongoing relationship where this might be the third or fourth time I've worked with them, and they created some works for this show directly. But I gotta say, when I last exhibited her work in Beijing, the people fell in love with her work that they invited her back, and she sold over $60,000 worth of works in China. And so she's a big hit in China. And so when I asked her to be in this show, she gave us works that are specific to this show. The ones here and the ones in Bardini. For me, the most important thing is my relationship with the artists, and how that relationship has fostered the curating of their works. So they're not just absolute strangers, but they're people whose works produced a relationship with me. And that is it. And thank you for your time. Thank you. Thank you. So hopefully you can be experts on this and you can give people more appealing renditions of it. Thank you.